I never thought I'd be writing something like this, a confession of betrayal, ruin, and a meticulously executed revenge. But here I am, sharing every raw detail so that you understand exactly what happens when trust is shattered and the ones you love and count on betray you in the worst possible way. This is my story. It's not a tale of dramatic romance or bittersweet reconciliation. It's a dark, unyielding account of how my wife, the woman I once believed was my partner in everything, not only cheated on me with my most trusted business partner, but then had the gall to return when that same man decided he'd had enough of her. And let me tell you, I made sure that betrayal never went unpunished. I built my life from the ground up, both personally and professionally, with relentless determination and endless sacrifices. My wife, Lauren, was my confidant and the love of my life for nearly a decade. Together, we weathered the storms of starting a business from scratch, sleepless nights filled with hopeful plans, and countless hurdles that tested our resolve. I trusted her implicitly, and I trusted my business partner, Mark, with my life. Mark and I weren't just partners in business. We were like brothers. We celebrated successes together, shared the burden of setbacks, and always had each other's backs. I thought that trust was mutual, unbreakable. I was wrong. It started subtly, a series of offhand comments, late-night phone calls that I pretended not to notice, and unexplained absences that I dismissed as work commitments. At first, I tried to ignore the creeping suspicion, clinging desperately to the image of a perfect marriage and an unblemished partnership. But then the undeniable evidence began to pile up. I started finding messages on Lauren's phone, flirtatious texts that were far too intimate to be mere friendly banter. My heart sank with every new discovery. The final blow came one autumn evening when I accidentally stumbled upon a series of emails between Lauren and Mark that left no room for doubt. They had been planning secret meetings behind my back for months. I remember sitting in the dark of our study, rereading every word until the bitter taste of betrayal filled my mouth. I confronted them the next morning, my voice trembling not with anger but with the deep hurt of knowing that the people I trusted most had turned against me. Lauren, with tears in her eyes, tried to spin a tale of loneliness and unmet emotional needs. Mark, cool and dismissive, claimed it was nothing more than a harmless affair that meant nothing. But I wasn't fooled. I had been a fool to trust them completely, and that foolishness had cost me everything I held dear. I left the room, my heart pounding with a fury that I had never felt before, and made a silent vow. Betrayal would never go unpunished. The first phase of my plan was to dismantle the foundation on which our shared empire was built. Mark and I had built our business together from the ground up, a company that once symbolized our combined dreams and sacrifices. I couldn't let his betrayal go without making sure he paid dearly for it. I started by quietly gathering evidence of his mismanagement, financial irregularities, and secret deals that he had been making without my knowledge. Every meeting, every phone call, every offhand remark that once meant nothing was now a piece in the puzzle of his inevitable downfall. I spent weeks poring over contracts, invoices, and emails, compiling a dossier that would expose every unethical decision, every fraudulent transaction, every instance of Mark's greed. I discovered that he had been siphoning money from our accounts into shell companies and using our clients' trust to fuel his personal extravagance. I knew that once this evidence was made public, he would not only lose his reputation, but also face legal consequences that would wipe him out financially. And so, while Mark was busy parading around, oblivious to the trap that was being set for him, I was meticulously crafting his undoing. I recall the day I decided it was time to act. I had stayed up all night organizing the files, each document a nail in the coffin of the man who had once been my brother. By morning, I had everything I needed to bring Mark down. I scheduled an emergency board meeting, inviting all our investors and key stakeholders, making sure that the evidence was presented in such a way that there was no escaping the truth. When the meeting began, I felt a calm determination settle over me. I wasn't just fighting for my money or my pride, I was fighting for justice. As I presented the documents, every word I spoke was laced with the pain of betrayal and the cold resolve of someone who had nothing left to lose. I detailed every instance of his deceit, every dollar that had been stolen, and every opportunity that had been squandered because of his greed. The room fell silent as investors exchanged shocked glances and whispered amongst themselves. Mark's face drained of color as he realized that the net had closed in around him. I concluded the meeting by stating unequivocally that trust, once broken, is irreparable. There was no room for forgiveness or redemption when betrayal was as calculated as his. In the aftermath, the company underwent a radical transformation. Investors pulled out their money from Mark's ventures, and the legal authorities took a keen interest in his financial misdeeds. The once unassailable image of the business partner I once admired crumbled before my eyes. Mark was forced to step down from his position, and his empire, built on deceit, quickly disintegrated. The revenge I had so meticulously planned was complete, and yet it was only part of my plan. A message had to be sent not only to him, but to my wife as well. When Lauren left with Mark, she thought she had escaped the consequences of her actions. She believed that she could abandon the wreckage she'd helped create and start anew with a man who, at the time, seemed charming and full of promises. For a while, it looked as if she was enjoying the freedom, living in the thrill of forbidden love and new beginnings. But as time passed, it became evident that Mark was not the man she believed him to be. His true colors emerged slowly: his arrogance, his selfishness, and his inability to care for someone other than himself. It wasn't long before he grew tired of the complications that came with her presence, and he coldly ended the relationship. I remember the day I received a call from her. It was late in the afternoon, and the sound of her voice on the other end was unlike anything I had ever heard before. Trembling, regretful, and desperate. She said she had made a mistake, that the love she once promised was now replaced with sorrow and remorse. Her tone was laden with tears, and her words dripped with the kind of guilt that comes only when one has truly lost everything. But I wasn't interested in her tears. I wasn't interested in the version of events that painted her as the victim of circumstance or a misguided soul seeking redemption. I remembered every single betrayal, every broken promise, and every time she looked at me with eyes that once held love, only to later betray that trust with lies and infidelity. I arranged to meet her at a small, nondescript cafe that we used to frequent in happier times. As I sat there waiting, I couldn't help but recall the countless times we had shared dreams of a bright future, dreams that were now nothing more than shattered illusions. When she finally walked in, she looked exactly as I remembered: fragile, remorseful, and lost. Her eyes widened when she saw me, and for a moment I could almost believe that she was still the woman I had once loved. But I wasn't about to let sentimentality cloud my judgment. I listened as she attempted to explain her actions, her voice barely audible above the hum of the other patrons. She talked about loneliness, about the allure of something new, about how she had been seduced by the promise of excitement and adventure. But every word she said only reinforced the magnitude of her betrayal. I interrupted her gently but firmly, reminding her that every decision had consequences and that the damage was irreversible. I told her that forgiveness was not on the table. What she had done had irrevocably altered the course of our lives. In that moment, I made it clear that while I would never stoop to the level of vindictiveness that allowed such treachery in the first place, I would ensure that she never again found the comfort or success she had once taken for granted. I wasn't interested in a reconciliation or in giving her another chance to mend our broken relationship. Instead, I had one final act of retribution planned, a final demonstration that betrayal, especially of this magnitude, could never be forgotten or forgiven. Over the next few weeks, I took deliberate steps to completely sever any ties with her in both my personal and professional life. I liquidated our joint assets, ensuring that she would have nothing to fall back on. I restructured the company in a way that left her with no stake, no claim to the legacy we had once built together. I made sure that every document, every financial record, bore the unmistakable mark of her absence. The process was methodical, cold, and clinical. Every time I finalized a decision, every time I crossed a line that once seemed unthinkable, I felt a small measure of satisfaction. A validation that the betrayal would never be forgotten. My actions weren't driven by anger alone, they were a declaration that I would never be the victim of a broken heart. I was determined to reclaim not only my financial independence, but also my dignity. And in doing so, I wanted to send a message. Those who betray trust will face consequences, and forgiveness is a luxury reserved only for those who have never crossed that line. In the weeks following the complete restructuring of our business, I began to rebuild my life on my own terms. I immersed myself in new projects, took on challenges that reinvigorated my passion, and slowly, the wounds of betrayal began to scar rather than bleed. Each scar was a testament to my resilience and a reminder that sometimes the most potent form of revenge is simply the ability to move forward and thrive in spite of the pain. I started mentoring young entrepreneurs, sharing my experiences with them, cautioning them against blind trust, and teaching them the importance of vigilance in both business and personal relationships. My reputation in the industry gradually transformed from that of a naive optimist to a seasoned veteran, a man who had seen the worst of human nature and emerged stronger because of it. Yet, even as I rebuilt my life and regained a sense of control, there was always a part of me that would remember the sting of that ultimate betrayal. I never spoke ill of Lauren in public, not out of mercy, but because I understood that the real victory was in reclaiming my own destiny rather than sinking to the level of perpetual bitterness. Every success I achieved was a silent rebuke to her and Mark, a constant reminder that while they may have thought they could shatter my world, they only fueled the fire that would eventually consume them both. The day she returned to me, the day when Lauren, broken, regretful, and utterly defeated, tried to re-enter the life she had abandoned, was the final chapter of this saga. I remember sitting in my office, the weight of the past months heavy on my shoulders, when the phone rang. It was her, voice trembling as she admitted that she had nowhere else to go. She pleaded for another chance, for the opportunity to explain that she was nothing more than a victim of circumstance. But I had already made my peace with the consequences of her actions. I listened quietly, each word deepening the chasm of our shared history. I told her, firmly and without a hint of nostalgia, that I could not and would not ever forgive her. The betrayal was too deep, the wounds too raw. I wished her no ill, but I refused to let her back into the life I had painstakingly rebuilt. That conversation was brief, a final acknowledgement that some bridges once burned can never be rebuilt. I ended the call with a sense of finality, a closure that was both liberating and devastating. I had won the battle, reclaimed what was mine, and in doing so, sent a clear message to anyone who might dare to betray those who trust them. My revenge wasn't about petty acts of vengeance or the satisfaction of watching my enemies suffer. It was about reasserting my own worth and proving that, no matter how deeply someone cuts you, you have the power to rise above the pain. Now, as I reflect on these events from the vantage point of time and experience, I realize that there is a peculiar kind of strength that comes from embracing the darkest parts of one's own story. I have learned that forgiveness is not always a virtue. It can sometimes be a sign of weakness, a willingness to let someone off the hook when they deserve to face the consequences of their actions. I made a choice that day, to walk away, to rebuild, and to ensure that those who once betrayed me were left to face the bitter fruits of their own treachery. In that choice, I found not only justice but also a newfound clarity about what it means to truly live without regrets. I share my story not to incite hatred, but to serve as a warning to anyone who might be tempted to trample on trust for their own gain. Betrayal leaves scars, and those scars, when nurtured by the fires of determination, can forge an unbreakable will. I have no regrets about the choices I made. I chose to stand alone rather than to compromise my values, and in doing so, I discovered a strength that I never knew existed. This isn't a tale of redemption or second chances. It's a testament to the fact that sometimes the best revenge is living a life that outshines the darkness left by those who once tried to destroy it. Looking back now, I understand that every act of treachery carries with it a weight that can either crush you or propel you to heights you never imagined. I chose the latter. I built a new life from the wreckage of my broken trust, one that is defined not by the actions of those who betrayed me, but by my own unyielding resolve to succeed. I now wake up every day with a renewed sense of purpose, a purpose that is untainted by regret or the need for forgiveness. I made my peace with the past by ensuring that the punishment fit the crime, that every betrayal was met with a corresponding act of retribution. This story, as raw and painful as it may be, is my truth. It is a reminder that life does not always offer a neat, dramatic romance or a forgiving resolution. Sometimes, the only answer is to stand tall, fight back, and never let anyone take away your power. The scars will remain, but they serve as a map of where you've been and proof that you survived when others failed. I don't seek validation or sympathy from anyone reading this. I simply want you to know that you have the strength to reclaim your life even when everything you hold dear is shattered. Now, as I sit here years later, I see a future where betrayal is no longer a source of shame, but a lesson in resilience. I have learned that revenge is not about returning to the past. It's about building a future that leaves no room for those who wish to see you broken. My story might not be one of forgiveness or second chances, but it is one of unyielding survival and a commitment to ensuring that betrayal, in all its ugly forms, never wins. In sharing every painstaking detail of what happened, I hope that anyone who finds themselves in a similar situation realizes that you can take back control of your life. Even when the ones you love betray you, there is a way to rise above the pain. I chose the path of cold, calculated retribution and personal rebirth, and it has made all the difference. Mark's empire lies in ruins, and Lauren's attempts at remorse have only served to remind me of the cost of misplaced trust. I now live for myself, stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever to forge my own destiny. To anyone reading this who has ever been betrayed, know that you are not alone. The path to recovery is not paved with forgiveness or the false promise of reconciliation. It's paved with the strength to stand up, to fight back, and to reclaim every bit of the life that was once taken from you. I have no illusions about the pain of betrayal, but I do have the truth that revenge, when executed with precision and a clear mind, can be the catalyst for a future that outshines the darkest of days. This is not a story with a neat moral or a tidy conclusion. It is a raw, unfiltered account of how the worst betrayals can lead to the greatest triumphs. I am not here to condone bitterness, but rather to illustrate that true strength lies in understanding that forgiveness is not always necessary. Some wounds are too deep to heal without a reminder of the past, a reminder that the ones who hurt you will always carry the mark of their actions. I have built a life that is entirely my own, free from the chains of regret or the weight of betrayal. Every decision I made, every step I took towards reclaiming my destiny, was a rejection of the notion that I could be defined by someone else's treachery. I took the shattered pieces of my trust and molded them into a foundation strong enough to support a future where I could look back and know that I had survived the unthinkable. So here I am, telling you my story with all its pain and all its victories. I don't expect anyone to understand the depths of my journey, but if my experience serves as a beacon of hope or a lesson in resilience for even one person, then sharing it was worth every agonizing moment. The betrayal by Lauren and Mark changed my life forever, but it did not break me. Instead, it forged me into someone who knows that revenge, when executed with a clear, unyielding purpose, is not about harboring hatred, but about reclaiming the very essence of who you are. I now move forward with my head held high, knowing that I have no regrets. I chose not to forgive because forgiveness would have been a betrayal of my own self-respect. Instead, I chose to rebuild, to rise, and to ensure that my story is one of survival against all odds. This is my life, a testament to the fact that even in the face of utter betrayal, the human spirit has the power to rise above the darkness and forge a path of undeniable strength. And so, I close this chapter of my life with the firm knowledge that the actions taken against me were met with a response that was as relentless as it was just. I am no longer defined by the betrayal of those who once claimed to love and support me. I have reclaimed my identity, and in doing so, I have proven that true revenge is not about stooping to the level of those who hurt you, but about rising so high that their actions are rendered meaningless by the force of your own determination. This is my final word. Betrayal may have once shattered my trust, but it also ignited within me a fire that will never be extinguished. I have built my life from the ashes of that painful history, and I will never, ever allow myself to be taken advantage of again. The choices I made then continue to define who I am today, a survivor, a fighter, and a man who refuses to ever be the victim of betrayal again.